This is Michael Grupp from Evolve Ministry. Now, this particular course is going to be about conspiracies and what is actually going on in regards to them. We're not going to talk about conspiracies in terms of what the government is doing. We're going to talk about conspiracies in terms of what it does to people who focus too heavily upon them. Now, this particular video is in regards to how, when you focus upon conspiracies, they actually empower the elites, the very people whom you would desire to basically fall away and die somewhere. Many people have extremely negative views upon the elites, and I want you to understand something. The elites are still part of this universe. They are still universal brethren regardless. Their negative actions are reprehensible, but then again, their negative actions are the very things that create the polarity enough for human beings to have choice here. So obviously they represent the negative polarity. There's a lot of things that they do which there's going to be many people who would argue with this, but there's certain things that are actually quite necessary. As our population continues to rise and rise, we are now falling away from more and more resources. This is the reason why war is spreading further and further at an accelerated rate on the planet, is because resources are starting to dwindle. And as those resources dwindle, there's still going to be a demand for them, and as the population goes up, that's going to ensure that there are less and less resources for everyone on the planet. Now, if we had done this thing right from the beginning, there would have been more than enough for everyone, but as it were, Americans, which represent 5% of the population, are absorbing close to 25, probably even 50% of the world's resources. So when you have other countries such as China, who have populations that range beyond the billions, same thing as India, other locations within the world that aren't getting near the amount of resources that only 350 to 400 million Americans are, then that is quite indicative that there is some disparity going on. And I hear a lot of times that, especially with the Occupy movement, they run around chanting, "We are the 99%. No, Americans are not the 99%. Americans are the 5%. And technically, if you want to really put it, break it down in terms of resources, then we are the 1%. We don't get to live the lifestyle that we do because we have an overabundance of materials. No, we steal those materials. Most of the people that I know, regardless if they're poor or not, they have a car, they have a roof over their heads, they have a refrigerator, they have a stove, they have video games, they have a big screen TV, and you will not be able to find those same luxuries in, say, Africa. You won't be able to find those same luxuries in South America. In some select places where the people actually have money, yes, you'll find those. But what Americans have to come to the realization of is it's mainly because of Americans that the rest of the world is suffering. This is true. So, with that in mind, when you are chanting to yourself, "We are the 99%, understand that you are not even close to the 99%. Americans live by far better than even the kings and queens of the past. I mean, we have heat at our disposal, we have air conditioning at our disposal, refrigeration at our disposal, at all times pretty much. The people who don't live that way, we call them homeless people. And they even still have access to internet. They even still have access, especially in certain areas of the United States. Where I live, they can be fed at any given time. They can be taken care of at any given time. So, if you think about what disparity is, and if you think about what it is that America represents and what it is that we take from the rest of the world, then you could sit back and look at yourself and say, hey, I'm living pretty well. So, Now, as I've talked about before with energy, when you focus your energy on something, anything, that is your energy going in, surrounding that particular person, going through that person. If it's going towards an object, it's going into that. You've seen many times in the videos that all I have to do is think, put my hands up, my energy expands outward, and then all of a sudden there's wind that's swirling around everywhere. Well, that's all done by thought. That's all done by my energy being focused. So what happens if I start focusing all of my negative energy towards, let's say, a group of people who use negative energy to attain everything that they get on the planet? If I sit and I focus my hatred, my angst, my paranoia, my fears, if I focus all that stuff, then that is my energy being donated right into a system, their system of creation, which is driven by negative energy. So what do I do when I do that? I'm actually empowering them. I'm making them stronger. A lot of people think that when they do what they do, that they are actually trying to bring awareness about to the population. And so yes, I can understand where on one hand you believe that you are bringing awareness to others who may not be aware that there are certain inequalities and elements of domination that are going on in the world that people tend to ignore. This is true. And I do believe that it's good to know a certain amount of this stuff so that way you understand the type of world that you live in. Because if you don't know that the world is this way, then there's not much we can do action-wise to change it. But once you get to the point where it has invaded your personal space, once it's gotten to the point where it invades your every thought, and then you become a negative person as a result of the conspiracies that you are focusing on, then it has now become a detrimental thing to your system. I myself definitely studied in the world of conspiracy for quite some time. In fact, I exhibited almost all of the symptoms that I just told you, became paranoid, became negative, became hateful and angry, and I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about ways that the world could change, ways that these people, the elites, could be taken out of the equation. And then I began to find myself just becoming an extremely negative and confrontational individual. And if people did not listen to me, if people didn't believe the same thing that I believed, then guess what would happen? Then the attacks would come. All right, so then I would insult people. I would berate people. And I would feel as if because I had this knowledge and they did not, that made me smarter somehow, made me more individualized and more special. It does not. What it does is it breaks you down bit by bit and then turns you into something that you didn't start off as. Now, personally, as I said before, I can understand the need for the knowledge. I can understand the need to look about and be aware of what's happening around your world. If you're not aware of what's going on, if you have no clue, then as I said before, there's no way that it can be changed. But here's the deal. Most people just stay in the conspiracy world. They stay in that grip of hatred against the elites or against anybody that they think has anything to do with it, like Freemasons, secret societies, etc. But they have absolutely no solutions whatsoever to bring to the table. And there are plenty. After doing this for some time, I figured out that there were in fact solutions, and they were all non-violent solutions. One of them is be careful where you spend your money. If you don't want multinational corporations taking over, kicking out all the mom and pop shops that there are all over the United States, then one of the best things to do is divert your money elsewhere. There are so many things that can be done on this planet that could change the entire course of the way the planet goes, and if everyone did it, then those elites wouldn't have a leg to stand on. After a while, all of their businesses would collapse. The money would be sent elsewhere, and then they would have to basically adapt to that. But it would be very hard for them to adapt to that because they have certain parameters set up that ensure that the money is wired to them directly. So unless people are willing to make the changes necessary, and you have to look at what kind of changes need to be made. If you use gasoline, that's one of the biggest methods of which the elites rule and operate the world. So if you have a car, well, maybe it's time to dump your car. But you see, most Americans don't want to do something like that. They don't want to get rid of their luxuries in order to make things better. They just want to, quote unquote, bitch about the situation, so that way they can seem as if they have taken the moral high ground. But none of their actions would indicate that they have. So when you're sitting there indulging yourself in all of these crises and the anger and the hatred, you are absorbing, you are soaking, you are being a part of that particular system. And when you're sending your negativity towards them, well, they're made of the negative polarity. They're just going to eat that up. They're going to absorb that, and they're going to use that energy to their advantage. You're not going to hurt them that way. You're not going to hurt them by getting a bunch of guns and running out and shooting at them because they've got tanks. So the best thing to do is to think of the most non-violent, the most peaceful ways of handling things, because that is something that they don't know what to do with. They're not made of that polarity. Therefore, the only thing that they do understand is the negative polarity, and they own that negative polarity. They're made of that negative polarity. So anytime you do what you do, and you're thinking in terms of negativity, fear, hatred, greed, all of that stuff, and you're sitting there sending that towards them, all you're doing is directing energy to them that they can redirect elsewhere and to control other people with. And this is the truth of the fact. Think about things like the Large Hadron Collider and HARP. HARP is probably going to be more likely the tool used, or HARP-like systems, because there's several out there now, and they have multiple areas across the globe of which they've gridded up, and they constantly send energy back and forth. A lot of times when they're using the colliders, other colliders around the Earth, okay, are also heated and warmed and are doing collisions. So oftentimes they like to coordinate their efforts because it creates heat signatures all over the planet which can be moved and used. So understand that you are feeding an engine of which they control anytime you're using that negative polarity. You feed directly into the very thing that they can wield against the population. Now, additionally, when we sit back and we start telling everyone we know about how the elites operate, typically, you know what that does? As opposed to make these people aware, what it does is it scares the crap out of them. And if it scares the crap out of them, and if they start feeling the same negativity, then those are more people that can be harvested on an energetic level by the negative polarity. So if you're running around saying, well, yes, these people own everything, and they have all the weapons in the world, and there's nothing that we can do, and that they're taking over, and they're going to enslave every man, woman, and child, well, then you're helping to make that a reality. You are giving the impetus to the elites to grow and to become stronger. And I've noticed that it's actually accelerated. The more people that have become aware about this, of course, the more angry people are, the more I notice that the elites are accelerating their movements across the earth. Their war movements, their depopulation movements, etc. And swinging this back around to the stuff that I was saying earlier, as our population goes up, we're taking more and more resources. There's a lot of people who are extremely against the idea of population control. They're willing to control the population of dogs on the planet. They're willing to control the population of the cats on the planet. They're willing to take away, to neuter, spay, and all this other stuff, anything else, but they don't want it done to themselves because for some reason human beings believe that they are above such measures. Well, given the fact that the population is going out of control, maybe that there is a small need to get this back in line, so that way we're not all competing and killing one another for resources. A lot of people don't want to look at designs like that and understand that there may be something else behind it. Now, one of the best things one can possibly do is ask themselves, how much has this information benefited me on the whole? In one sense, you get awareness. In one sense, you get the knowledge that this stuff is occurring, and you can see through a lot of the stuff that happens throughout the media and the strings that they pull. So on one hand, you get that. But when it comes to the conspiracy realm, if one immerses themselves very deeply, then they start to tend to lose friends. They start to tend to lose family. They tend to get angry. They tend to become depressed because they see that the world around them is not exactly the way it was presented when they were a child. And so once you start looking at all these things, you have to ask yourself, wait a second, am I doing more damage to myself by delving into this world? Am I helping the world by doing this? Am I helping society? Or am I helping to spread a bunch of anger and negativity that could be harvested against me? Many times I've seen from people who have worked in the conspiracy field, they suddenly become paranoid. They suddenly start believing that the government is watching them, that they're being marked, that at some point that they'll probably be marked for death, etc. They get to the point where they believe that they are so important for the knowledge that they have that they're being targeted by those who would seek to silence them. Elites are going to be more happy that you're running around spreading this stuff than they are going to be if you weren't. Because that helps them in many ways to give the air of invincibility over the entire population. And if the entire population actually believes that they are under the influence of a tyrannical system which will one day take them over, and they're not willing to step up and do anything about it, then guess what? You've sold that illusion, and the illusion may end up becoming a reality. There are solutions to all of this. The biggest thing that you can possibly do is realize that you are an autonomous being, and there's nothing down here that anybody can do, including the elites, to take that away from you. Your soul is yours. If you know this, then you also know that you have nothing to fear. That it's just a figment of your imagination. Yes, the elites are down here doing things. Yes, there are conspiracies that occur. But what has it done for you on a level of the soul, of the mind, of the body? Has it benefited you? Chances are it has not. Anyway, there's going to be videos coming very shortly in regards to this. Actually, it'll be at the very end of this that will give you techniques on how to actually cleanse yourself from that sort of polarity, that sort of vibration, and to look for positive solutions that can help the world actually grow.